You guys know from our introduction that Paul had never been to the city of Rome. He has never met many of the Christians that live in Rome and that church that exists there. And just for the sake of accountability, I need you to know that in Rome, this church that's there, these are small house churches. They do not know your experience. They did not have padded chairs. Be with me today, Lord. They didn't know anything about air conditioning, the internet, YouTube, Facebook. They don't have the conveniences that we so readily enjoy and perhaps sometimes take for granted. These are a people who are aware of some of the things that God is doing because He started a work in them. And Paul writes these people and he lets them know, listen, it's been my desire, it's been my heart's desire, my plan to come and see you. But some of them have come to a different conclusion. Some of them have decided that Paul is not coming because he's ashamed. And he's not coming to Rome because he has differences with these people. In fact, there are those who are making accusations at Paul and saying the reason why he stays away, because in Rome, we want to hear that message that he's preaching to the Gentiles everywhere that he won't preach here. But if he comes here, we're smart enough, we're intelligent enough, we're knowledgeable enough that if it's not right, we'll tear his doctrine apart. Somebody made accusations. And what you're looking at in verses 8 through 17 are technically 4 proofs about Paul's sincerity in his ministry. You need to hold on to these things because there's going to come a day in your life when some of these same areas in your life and in your faith are going to be challenged. And I don't want you to be unaware. I don't want you to get caught off guard. If it could happen to Paul, I got news for you. It can happen to you. It can happen to me. There are 4 proofs here simply. In verse 7, he simply says that you who are the beloved of God, and you need to know this today. I don't care what your life experience has been. The devil's a liar if you don't know that God loves you. I don't care who said what. You need to know that God loves you. If the whole world has turned their backs on you, God never will. Amen. You need to hear that today. You need to hear that. Paul would tell these people he is sincere not only about his love for them, but the message that he preaches. He's sincere about that message, and it's consistent. He would let these people know that he is sincere about the person of Jesus and Jesus as the Christ. 4 things. They are loved. He's got a solid message that he's committed to. He's sincere about the person of Jesus Christ. And then you find this in verse 16. On that basis, I am not ashamed. Paul would look them in the eyeball and tell them face to face, I'm not ashamed of you. I'm not ashamed of Jesus. I'm not staying away from you because I don't think my doctrinal tenets will stand up, because there's some flaw in what I'm teaching. Oh, no. I'm confident about what I'm doing, who I serve, the message that I preach. And to boil it down, I'm convinced that the gospel of Jesus Christ is what every man and every woman needs. That's not religion. He's talking about transformation. This is how you change in people's lives. You don't do it by just showing up at church, because some of you will come here and go back the same way you came in. I hope that's not the case. Oh, I'm challenging you. I hope that's not the case. Don't ever walk into a church, a place of worship, and try to sit there and evaluate and see what's going on, whether it's up to your standards or not. All of our standards fall short of the glory of God. Mine, yours, all of us. So we are not the standard. I need you to know that. Jesus is the standard. Got to see that very clearly. There's some things that make this Roman church unique and distinct. And I heard the song this morning. It was almost like, man, Lord, you're saying the same thing multiple times in multiple ways. but you're saying the same thing. There's something about this church that distinguishes itself. And Paul says, I see you. I know you. I want you to know I understand there's something about you. And I need you to see this today. Because sometimes you don't see uniquely how God is using you. You don't know how unique and significant you are. We are sometimes. We lose sight of these things. He simply says, listen, these people here had something about them that was totally different. They had a reputation. Now, some of y'all got reputations. Don't tell anybody. There's folk that know you. They already know you. They know stuff about you. You don't want folk to know. But, in fact, them kind of folk you try to get away from, folk to know you. And, don't tell my business. Pass it on. These people have a reputation. Paul said that these people had a reputation of faith. That their faith was going all out to the world. Other people were telling other people about these Romans and the faith that is developing in their lives. And so they had a reputation. And their reputation spoke. Their faith spoke. And people recognized the uniqueness of these people based on the faith that they have. It's an interesting thought. I want you to see this today. Here's the second thing I think that it's always important. In this church, you and I know now, Paul didn't found this church. Peter did not plant this church. You need to catch this today. God moved on the hearts of some people who got saved in Acts 2, and they were from Rome. They gave their hearts to God in Acts chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost. They traveled back to Rome, and God inspires these people to just live out their faith in their homes, in their families, in their communities, on their jobs. And this reputation of their faith begins to spread. And now people begin to see God moving in these people. And God is going from one person to the next person to the next person. Now here's the foundational truth that makes this church unique. God is doing this alone. I need to hear that today. I need you to hear this today. I hope somebody hears this. I need it to touch your heart. In Rome, God's himself building the church. There's no evangelism team. There is no administrative staff. There are no paid clergy. There is no building. There is no hub where people can go and just show up on Sunday morning. They are finding God because God is reaching out to them. He's the one stirring their hearts. Paul comes along, he starts to write them. He tells them, you know what? I heard about this. I've had that same experience. God caught me on the road to Damascus, knocked me down, turned me around, shared the gospel with me, and Christ himself, Christ alone saved me. Then he turned around and Jesus, Christ himself, taught me. Now, I didn't get this wisdom from Peter. Now, I didn't get it from James. I didn't get it from John. Mark wasn't there. Matthew wasn't there. Luke wasn't there. Jesus came to me, and Jesus alone spoke to me. Y'all ought to walk with me this morning. Some of y'all trying to find something. You're trying to find what's missing in your life, and you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking all over, and you just missed what God himself wants to do. And Paul tells him, listen, I see you. I'm just like you. God is building your church. Jesus called me and built me. He was so moved by this concept. I want to show you this in Scripture. He took this concept of God alone, Christ alone, and taught it other places. Look at the book of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 3. I want to read these verses to you. You've read them before. You've read it, and you read right through it. You read right over it. Paul says, I planted. I want you to see the diversity. Apollos watered. And then you see this grammatical comma here. And you see this word but, which is in linguistic terms, in writing, it's called a conjunction so that you can understand purpose or reason. And so the writer says, Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God was causing the growth. So that neither then the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything but God who causes the growth. Everywhere the principle is the same. God is the one who's causing the growth in the life of people. Don't worry sometimes if there's nobody else around. Don't worry if you don't have a big crowd. Don't worry about what you think you lack, because God, if he's in your life, God and you alone can get done what God needs to do. You need to relish in that, not be discouraged about that. Paul simply said, I learned a principle. I spent 3 years out there in the desert being taught by Jesus. Yeah, I thought I was alone, but not when Jesus is with me. No, never alone, not by myself. You got to see these kind of things. You got to pick it up and grab a hold of it. Here's another principle I want you to walk away with. Anytime, at any level, people are God's work. Churches are running around doing building funds. We doing this and we doing that, and we trying to fix this. God trying to fix people. People are God's work. And the people, if you'll let me to stretch your imagination, the people are God's building project. Trying to build into the lives of people the person of Jesus Christ. And then God himself wants to complete his work in you and me, in us. You got to hold on to these things. This is not religion. This is not subjective feeling where the pastor can stand up here and just move your heart and touch your feelings and you get all excited. This is not about presenting some wishful thinking kind of stuff. This ain't even no positive thinking kind of worship service. Not interested in none of that. None of that. Listen to this. In his letter here, Paul says, I give thanks for you. And you look at that and say, wow, that's great. Let's move on. No, I want you to see this. He thanked God for them, not their commitment, not their giving, not their knowledge, not their ability, not the fact they've been married 40 plus years. None of that. I thank God for you. I'm interested. The idea is I'm interested in you. Thanking God for who he is in your life. Sometimes we get to thinking about what we've achieved and if I accomplish anything, it's because God is working in me. And I get a chance to be in partnership with God. That's what the word fellowship means, people. Fellowship in Greek is the word koinonia. It means joint partnership with God, joining hands, reaching out a hand, shaking God's hand, and getting into partnership with him. And when you shake hands with him and you join hands with others, you're in the right company. You're in the right company. Paul would simply say, listen, I'm serving God with my whole spirit in verse 9. Because, somebody said Paul was only doing this for the money. No, Paul said, with my whole spirit, my whole mind, I'm serving God. My life is being laid down. What is he looking for? Verse 11 will simply say he's looking for growth and continued growth, spiritual development. Here's another thought. Sometimes we don't understand fully what God has called us to. And sometimes we can even understand that and get lost, get a little bit discouraged and get sidetracked. Sometimes after you've been in ministry a while, sometimes after you walk with Christ a while, maybe you've done one thing, to a point that you just feel, man, Lord, what else is there? I want you to see this. Paul kept telling them, I've been trying to come to you. I've planned to come, but I have actually been prevented from coming. And nevertheless, Paul, while his interest and desire is to go to Rome, And when that stopped, he keeps going over here and over here and over there, which is exactly where God is sending him so that he can preach the gospel to Gentiles in one city, another city, another city. And here's the distinction Paul finally came to the conclusion of. I have been called to evangelize Gentiles. I have been called to take the gospel of Jesus Christ globally, everywhere. He didn't call me, listen carefully, he didn't call me to show up and just teach Christians. Let it sink in. He would tell them God didn't just anoint me, gift me, and call me just to sit up in church and teach folk who just going to sit there listening to me and then all of us go our merry way. Paul said, no. He called me to set the captives free and to go where other people haven't gone. Blaze trails where there are none so others can follow me. In Romans chapter 15 and verse 20 through 22, you read this. And thus I aspired to preach the gospel, not where Christ was already named, so that I would not build on another man's foundation. This is intentional. But as it is written, they who had no news of him shall see, and they who have not heard shall understand. For this reason, I have often been prevented from coming to you, because God sent me other places. And you know, that's not a problem. When Paul realized that God was already doing the teaching in Rome, what in the world am I going to say if God doing the talking? What do I do if God is already doing the anointing? Here's another nugget. I call these things golden nuggets of truth, and that's why I take the time to share them with you. You can't afford to overlook them. In verse 14, Paul says this, I am under obligation. I'm under obligation. That is the Greek word ophilius. It means indebted. It means that I am an ower. I owe a debt. I am an ophilius. I owe a debt. I have an obligation. And then Paul would say I have 3 areas of social obligation in verse 14. I have an obligation to the Greeks. I have an obligation to the barbarians, and he puts the last category, although they're too talked about, he puts them in the same category, the wise and the unwise. Those are my areas of obligation. Do you sense that clarity? Do you sense that not just commitment, but recognition of what God has called him to do? I can tell you I want to be there. I can tell you I've made plans. But here's the truth. I haven't come because God is the one who's in charge. He sent me different directions. And so I have an obligation. Let me just touch on this for a moment, because in the first century, if you were Greek, even though those Greeks lived in Rome or in Europe, we're talking Europe now, these Greeks saw themselves as the intellectuals. They live in the province of Rome or Italy in this country, but they see themselves as intellectuals, superior to everyone else. Paul says, I have an obligation to these intellectuals, because it's really not a matter of where you went to school. Doesn't matter where you live. Doesn't matter where and how you were raised. Doesn't matter that you think culturally you are superior to everyone else. Here's the truth. You need the gospel. And Paul says, I've been called to these people. He says that I have an obligation to the next group, the barbarian. This is how the barbarian came about. It's the Greeks who declared that if you don't speak Koinonia Greek, the common language of that time in the first century, you were considered a barbarian. So if you was a Jewish person, you was a barbarian. I don't care where you're from, if you don't speak Greek, you were a barbarian. Now, you guys stick with me on this. I found out something this last Wednesday. Greg told the Bible study last Wednesday. He said God gave him revelation because of a verse that we read in verse 8. You'll find it in verse 8, chapter 1. He says, I think Paul was from Texas. What? kind of threw me off a little bit. No, he looked me right dead in my face. Paul from Texas. Didn't y'all see it in verse 8? In verse 8, just let me go back and read. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all. He said, that man's from Texas, y'all. Come on, y'all. You know, I was born in Akron, Ohio. My wife and I were born up north. But the first thing I realized when I came down south, everybody knew I wasn't from here every time I opened my mouth. There was something about my northern dialogue that was completely different from southern slang. And everybody would ask me, where are you from? Why you want to ask me where I'm from? Where are you from? I'm from here and you're not. and they would simply know this. But to those Greeks, everyone who couldn't speak Koinonia Greek was a barbarian, and that is how they viewed them. With the barbarians, it wasn't a matter of whether or not they weren't intelligent. It was just that they were different. And they couldn't speak that common language. And so they classify them differently. However, the third category is different. He calls one group wise and the other group unwise. One group is very competent and capable. The other group was just flat out foolish. He was very, very generous, and he just called them unwise. They was foolish. Y'all know who I'm talking about. These were the people you could count on them to mess up every time. These were the folk when you gave them clear instructions to go right, they went straight left. These are the people who, like my mother, were from Missouri. You got to show them, and that means you better take them by the hand and put them where you want them, because they're going to head another direction. This is the kind of group you don't take your eyes off them because they're going to drift. Here's the idea. In the middle of all of this, here's where I want to land for our message today. In verse 16, Paul gives what I understand to be, and this is the kind of stuff you need when you're doing your Bible study. You need to know who's writing the letter. You need to know where they're writing to or where the writer is writing from. You need to know the audience because it will tell you so much more about the revelation. And so Paul is in this verse 16, he's going to tell these readers his thesis statement. He's going to tell them, here is the reason why I am writing to you. Every one of the 66 books in the Bible has a thesis statement, a reason why the writer wrote. That is where you want to go, because that is where the root of the Word of God in that book is planted. You have to have that information. Otherwise, you'll start adding things to the text, and you'll end up all over the place. You will be what we used to call when we were little, going down rabbit holes. And rabbits got holes, and they go down to one hole. He come out another hole over here. If you happen to see him over there, duck back down. He got a bunch of holes coming up all over the place. You'll be lost. The writer simply says in verse 16, I am not ashamed of the gospel. Here's his reason for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. I asked you a question a couple weeks ago. How can a just God justify unjust people and remain holy? How can God take a square peg and put it in a round hole? How can God let how can a holy God let sinners into heaven and stay holy himself? Paul just told you. He simply said, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God. He uses the word for salvation. And in that concept, you'll see it again in verse 17, is where we get the word justification. You'll see this in a moment, that the righteousness of God unveils something about God, that the gospel tells you the story about God and what God not only has done. Remember, God's at work, and his work is people, and he's working on people to set people free. And in the work of God, God saves, God delivers, God heals. God does it through the gospel, which is revealed at the cross. Got to have this stuff. You just got to have it. Paul tells them, listen, I don't care who you are. Everybody needs this. When we talk in verse 17, I want to read it for you. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed. This is how he works. He reveals it from faith to faith, as it is written. But the righteous man shall live by faith. Key words, faith to faith. It's a moving apparatus. The righteousness of God is revealed. There are big concepts in these two verses. Justification is in this verse 16. Righteousness has everything to do with how God can set sinners free. When he talks about revealing his work in verse 17, I want you to catch, this is the big picture. This is how God sanctifies people. See, if you're just showing up at church and I'm going to try to get right. I'm going to church this Sunday. I'm going to get right. But Monday comes, and the folk on your job who ain't right, who know you haven't been right, and you tell them, listen, I went to church on Sunday. What for? That's what they tell you. Why? Them old blowhard preachers, they ain't got nothing down there. They not right. They start telling the same story about preachers that they told about Paul, and they didn't know what they were talking about. But in verse 17, he says, this is how the righteousness of God is revealed. This is how we get set free. This is how God sets apart sinners, justifies them, and makes them right before him and maintains his own holiness. In verse 17, when he uses this word righteousness, I think I've got it on the slide, it's diakonia. Diakone, rather. It means character. It means character, or the quality of being right or just. Listen to me carefully. In the very first part of that Greek word, you find the word dika, D-I-K-A. That is a statement. The word dika simply means to judge, and to judge uprightly. It means justice. And so the writer is in his own way trying to convey and communicate to his audience something about God. In fact, that word, diakoneo, can be spelled right wiseness. It's the idea of telling you a characteristic about God that is absolutely beneficial to you. And he's showing them how the righteousness of God is essentially the same thing as his faithfulness, his trustfulness. It is the same way that God in his nature is consistent with his promises and how he deals with people. Life will throw you curveballs and cut you at the knees and knock you down, hit you in the gut, take all the breath out of your body. But Paul says, for in it, talking about the gospel, is the righteousness of God revealed. Lord, help me to do this. Help somebody to understand today. Help somebody to hear and understand how God's righteousness being revealed sets them free. I want you to see this today. Here's a doctrinal principle. God is not indifferent to sin, nor does he regard it lightly. But God is prepared to help sinners and to set them free. Look at Romans chapter 3. We read this this morning. I want to know if you caught it. Romans 3, 25 and 26. Whom God displayed, talking about Jesus, publicly, as a propitiation in his blood through faith. That, he says, was to demonstrate his righteousness. Think about it like that. Jesus went to the cross to die, to demonstrate his righteousness. Because in the forbearance of God, the knowledge of God, he passed over the sins previously committed. So when Jesus goes to Calvary, his blood is shed. It's not just for the suffering, it's for the sinners who've been trapped in their sin, who could not get free. And Jesus is doing something for everyone who will listen and believe. And he says, listen, this was to demonstrate his righteousness, because in the forbearance of God, he passed over the sins previously committed. To demonstrate, I say, of his righteousness at the present time, so that he would be just and the justifier of the one who has faith. How do sinners get set free? God won't overlook sin, but he is the very God who's willing to pay the sin debt. He calls that a revelation, a revealing. It's not just a guy on the cross. Jesus is the God-man. God who left heaven, came to earth, became a man, and died at Calvary. Jesus is not normal. His death is not normal. He comes and he represents the standard of God. God is perfect. David, sometimes when you try to use the level and you can't get the level, it's too long of a span, and you go get the plumb line. You go to the top, you drop the plumb line down, and the weight of the plumb on the line, once it stops swinging, it will stay in one spot. It's considered straight. It's considered plumb. That's how God is. He's straight. He's plumb. He's true. He has no moral flaw. And in him, he has the ability to make things right between God and man. He can do it. How does that get done, Pastor? He doesn't fool with us. He imputes to us Jesus' righteousness. He doesn't ask you, well, just go get right and fix yourself and come back. You walk up to him, he's looking at you, he knows you need help. You don't even have to say anything. He knows. Put your faith in me. I can fix you. Put your faith in me. I want to share some things with you. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to share a couple of illustrations, and I'm going to get out of this real quick. I know Mother's Day is on us, and so are the restaurants and things we want to do for our loved ones. I want you to think about a story. When I was a little boy, we were watching black and white TV. Now, some of y'all don't know nothing about that. They had this story on about Jason and the Argonauts. And Jason and, y'all with me. All right, we got some folk, y'all. All right, Jason and the Argonauts. Jason is on a journey. He's looking for a golden fleece. Just like most people, I'm trying to get rich. He's on the journey. They travel all over the world looking for this golden fleece. Now, I got my own twist on the story, all right? Let me use my own twist on the story. Jason gets to the place where he can find the fleece. Finally, he gets to the place where the fleece is located. And he comes to a gate, and there's a sphinx at the gate. And the sphinx is there. This is a being that's half animal and half man. And he asked him, why are you here? And Jason tells him, we're looking for that golden fleece. We want that fleece. He says, I have a riddle. I have a riddle for you. I'll let you through, but you have to give the right answer to the riddle. If you don't decipher it right, I got some other things I'm going to do. There's a bunch of bones around here. Bunch of dry bones, and the sphinx is just waiting on him. He gives him this riddle. He tells him this, listen. What animal walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs midday, 3 legs in the evening? And he starts to salivate. Can you answer that? Answer it correctly now. Answer it correctly, and I'll let you through. And the fleece is yonder. It's over there. But if you don't answer it, your bones are going to end up here with the rest of these. I will consume you today. So the man just simply responds back. And he answers, it's man. It's humanity. Man, when he is young and he's born, he crawls on all fours. In the mid part of his life, he walks on 2 legs. At the end of his life, he walks on 3 legs. The right leg, the left leg, and a crutch. And the Sphinx said, somebody must have told you that. He walks and lets him through the gate. But here's a story a little closer to home in my personal life. My wife and I, we had a Rottweiler for many years. 12, 14 years, honey. She was a female. Beautiful dog. I love that dog. She was a part of our family. She saw herself as a daughter of mine. I'm serious. She saw herself as one of the children. And that dog was amazing. But her life and my experience with her being a protector was something that I won't ever forget. And so I will share this next illustration with you with her in mind. And I need you to see it. So I'm going to use 2 biblical words that Paul just used, and I'll help you. I'll help you to see this. In verse 18, it's not in our text today, but he talks about the wrath of God. The Greek word for wrath is orge. So I want you to think of orge as a Rottweiler. Orge is wrath. In verse 17, the word we just talked about, dika, this idea here is justice. So I want you to think of orge and dika as 2 full-grown, mature Rottweilers who are placed in a position to protect entrances into heaven. And they are standing there at the gates as people come in and try to enter. And orge, he is strictly business. This is nothing but wrath. I'm angry. I stay angry. I haven't eaten enough, and I'm ready to eat. And dika is justice, but just as angry. Now listen, orge is not a German Rottweiler. It's not a Russian Rottweiler. And dika is just a straight-up Rottweiler. But one is about wrath, and the other is about justice. One is about, I will deal with you. And the other one is righteousness. Doing right. And so the Rottweilers, they stand there, and they're at the gate. And when people come to the gate, there's another riddle that's given. And orge and dika are standing there. And the riddle goes like this. When you look around, do you see God in his beauty? And the people standing there at the gate, oh yes, I see him. Orge and dika, they ask, would you like to be with him forever? Oh, yes, that's why I'm here. I want to get into heaven. I want to be there. Orge and dika simply say, do you see that lake? Yes. I don't want to focus on that. That's the lake of fire. Do you want to be there? Or would you rather be in heaven? I don't want to go to the lake of fire. I would much rather be in heaven. And here they go. Here's the riddle. How are the people in his presence dressed in white, clean robes? How do you get those white robes? They ask. How did the people who are on the other side of the gate, how did they get there? Do you know? How did Jesus, a just God, or how did a just God forgive unjust sinners? How did God do that? Do you know? Orge and dika ask. How can the one who demands absolute perfection let imperfect people into his presence? How does that happen? Do you know? How can a round peg fit in a square hole? How is that possible? How can a just God remain just by allowing unjust people into his presence? How is that possible? Orge and Dika ask. God's standards are so high, they say. He never forgives anyone unless he can be just in doing so. He won't do it. Orke and Dika simply say there'll never be any forgiveness without justice. How do you answer that? What is your response? You're not going to be able to stand at the gate and tell them your uncle's cousin's nephew's brother was a preacher. You're not going to be able to tell them my mom was a praying woman. That won't work. Not for you. Not for you. How do you answer these questions? Here's how the righteous answer those questions. They stand at the gates and they tell Orge and Dika, listen, I'm not holding on to anything of myself because there's nothing righteous about me. I have nothing to hold on to. I can't tell you what the name of my church is because I don't know that will matter up here. Some of y'all might stand there and say, I was a member of Fellowship Community Church. But Orge and Dika, they're not interested in that. They need to know what has happened inside of you. What has God done for you? And that righteous person just simply says, listen, I'm a failure. I'm a moral failure. I have nothing in me or about me that would justify God saving me or letting me in. But here's the only thing I do know for sure. I believe Jesus Christ is sufficient to pay my sin debt, and I put my faith in him. I don't understand theology. I don't understand all those doctrines, but I know that God did something with me when the gospel was shared with me, and the gospel changed me, and the gospel liberated me. I know that God did something on Calvary in Jesus that revealed his love for me. You know, the truth of it is, you don't need a Bible study for all of this. Who is the only person that can forgive sin? I got news for you. Only God can. And God went to that cross on Calvary. God laid his life down, that human life down, so that you could be saved. So there are three things here, and I'll get out of this. In verse 16, the gospel is God's vehicle to unveil his righteousness, and that is what will explain how a just God can save unjust people and still remain just. It's in the message of the gospel that reveals who God is and what God has done. In verse 17 will tell you it's about faith. It's about faith and faith alone. It's about faith in Jesus Christ who went to Calvary alone. It's about the faith that laid its own life down so that yours could be picked up. It's about faith and faith alone in Christ. Here's the good news. God is calling everybody. You'll find out in verses 18 forward that the general revelation is God's vehicle for letting people know there is a God whether you've been to church or not. If you wake up and the sun rises on time, he's God. If you can lay yourself down at night and the sun still sets every night, I got news for you. That's because he's still God. If that grass continues to grow, don't complain that it has to be cut. Because that grass is growing in the manner in which it was made. God is still God in nature. And nature is telling the story of the existence of the God that made it. And finally, don't get mad, Paul would say. Don't get mad. Don't get mad because I'm Jewish and you are Greek. Don't get mad because you're Roman and I'm Jewish. Don't get mad because there are others who are barbarians and can't speak the Koine Greek. Don't get mad. Don't be arrogant. Don't be proud. Because the promise of God through Abraham is that he gave the gospel to the Jews first. That's God's doing, not mine. That's God's doing. So there's an offering here. There's an offering at Calvary. These people had something that you and I need. These people had the essential elements that everyone needs. They had the kind of faith that God alone produces. Listen carefully. Their faith went from faith to faith. It didn't take an apostle to come to Rome because there were godly people there whose faith started moving and speaking and transferring. And their faith moved to others who became faithful, who trusted and believed, and they told others. And so it spread. It's the last time you shared the gospel with somebody. Don't look at the floor. When's the last time you sat down next to someone and you encouraged them? Trust Jesus Christ and Christ alone. Let God work in you like no other. And then walk with them. And listen, don't be ashamed that they're sinners. So were you. So was I. Too often churches so holy sinners can't come. Who's going to show up? Who's going to show up if the sinners don't show up? What kind of church is that? It's time for us to go to heaven if ain't nobody here but saints. There's work to do in the world. Faith to faith to faith. And everyone needs that, I tell you, because one day, here are the problems. Trials are going to come. Tests are going to come. Tribulation is going to come. And we are going to be tested. And what you believe is going to be put to the test. And you need to grow. We need to develop. Every head bowed, every eye closed.